One of the clearest and most terrifying indicators that a narcissist has crossed the line into something far more dangerous, into something that can only be described as evil, is the emergence of pleasure in the suffering of others. This is not mere schadenfreude, the petty delight in a rival's fall. No, this is something more deliberate. It is the psychological equivalent of bloodlust masked behind a smile or an eye roll, and it marks a pivotal transformation. The moment where injury becomes weapon and defense becomes offense. You see, most narcissism originates in profound injury. Emotional neglect, abandonment, humiliation, these things tear into the developing psyche. To survive, the individual constructs a grandiose false self. It's a shell, a fortress. And in that fortress, they are untouchable, perfect, special, superior. But the original wound doesn't go away. It festers, and over time, the effort to maintain the illusion of superiority becomes exhausting. Reality keeps intruding, people disagree with them, life refuses to submit. And so, in their twisted logic, the world must be punished. At this stage, the narcissist is no longer just defending a fragile ego. They begin to take joy in destruction. They enjoy seeing others fail. It affirms their distorted worldview. It proves in their mind that no one else is truly better. If you're happy, it threatens their illusion of omnipotence so that happiness must be tarnished. If you're successful, it provokes unbearable envy so that success must be undermined. And if you're innocent, it reminds them of what they lost or never had so that innocence must be defiled. It begins subtly. Backhanded compliments, sarcasm that cuts too deep, smirks when you falter. But these are not accidental. These are calculated jabs. And what's more disturbing, they feel good doing it. In their inner world, they believe they are extracting justice. Their suffering, real or imagined, has authorized them to become arbiters of pain. They are in essence recreating their own trauma in others, but now they're in control. They become what once hurt them. And here's the critical shift. They no longer seek healing. They seek vengeance. Not against one person, but against reality itself. Because life dared to wound them, life must now bleed. This is when empathy dies entirely, not just numbed or distorted, dead, replaced by the hunger to inflict, not merely to protect the self, but to assert dominance over others' emotions, thoughts, even their sense of worth. This is the moral collapse. The shift from wounded to malicious, and it's terrifying because it's often invisible, cloaked in charm, intellect, humor. You don't see the grin behind the mask until it's too late. They will claim to be victims. They will cry injustice. But watch their eyes when someone stumbles. Watch the delight they fail to hide. That's not pain. That's satisfaction. That's the moment you know. They're not just broken, they're becoming something darker, something dangerous, something evil. At a certain point in the descent of the narcissist, when the mask begins to solidify and the soul retreats into distortion, truth is no longer merely avoided or distorted. It becomes something far more sinister, a weapon, and that is a critical distinction. Early in the narcissistic pathology, truth is inconvenient. It's a source of shame. It reveals inadequacy, contradiction, failure. So it is evaded, minimized, twisted into more palatable narratives. But as the narcissist evolves, mutates into something more malevolent, they begin to understand something chilling, that truth, when carefully manipulated, can do more damage than lies ever could. Is no longer about preserving a false self. It's about dominating the psychological landscape of others. The narcissist doesn't merely lie, that would be too crude, too detectable. Instead, they blend truths with fabrications, lace facts with omissions, distort context while preserving just enough reality to make you doubt your instincts. They become masterful illusionists, and their medium is not smoke, it's your mind. Consider what happens in gaslighting. It is not the outright denial of reality. It is the gradual erosion of your ability to trust yourself The narcissist will assert something that is almost true, close enough to disarm you, but just twisted enough to make you question what's real, and then they repeat it calmly, consistently, even convincingly, and slowly your confidence starts to fracture. You begin to wonder if maybe they are right. Maybe you are too sensitive. Maybe you misunderstood. This is not forgetfulness, this is warfare, psychological manipulation disguised as discourse. But it doesn't stop there. The narcissist begins to tell your story for you. They speak over you, for you, about you. They create narratives in which they are always the victim, and you, by contrast, become unstable, cruel, selfish. They will tell others half-truths, carefully selected moments, decontextualized confessions. And because they often speak with passion, intelligence, and charm, people believe them. That's the horror. They don't distort truth randomly. They weaponize it strategically. And why do they do this? Because if they can control truth, they can control perception. And if they control perception, they control reality. Your reality and everyone else's. And in that control, they find their power. Not to build, not to lead, but to rule through deception. Like tyrants of the invisible, they govern with distortion as their law and confusion as their terrain. And here lies the moral inversion. Truth, which ought to liberate, becomes the very thing that enslaves. The narcissist, once afraid of being seen, now thrives on visibility, but only on their terms. Only through the mirror they've constructed, where they are always righteous, always wounded, always justified. Everyone else is a threat to their narrative, and so you must be silenced, discredited, rewritten. This is not merely dishonesty, this is the hijacking of reality. Truth is not just the first casualty, it is the ultimate weapon, and in the narcissist's hands, it becomes the most dangerous one of all. Isolation, social, emotional, and psychological, is not just a consequence of narcissistic abuse, it is an engineered strategy. It is deliberate, it is precise, and it is one of the most insidious weapons the malignant narcissist wields. Because no tyrant, no manipulator can maintain power over someone who has access to clarity, to affirmation, to truth reflected through the eyes of others. So the first step is always the same. Sever the tie. Subtly, gradually, and with plausible deniability. They don't start by locking you away. That would be too obvious. They start by planting doubt about your friends, your family, your judgment. Are you sure they care about you? I've never liked the way they talk to you. You seem different after spending time with them. And if you object, they feign concern. Not control, concern. I just want what's best for you. And that's the trap. They make it seem like protection, when in reality it's isolation. What they fear more than anything is your independence, your psychological sovereignty. Because in that independence lies the power to resist, to question, to walk away. So they dismantle it brick by brick. They position themselves as your sole source of validation, your sole confidant, the only one who truly understands you. And in that manufactured intimacy, you begin to feel special, seen, understood. But it's a counterfeit bond. It's not built on mutual respect. It's constructed to create dependence. And when you begin to rely on them, that's when the control tightens. They start to reframe your reality. Without the outside voices of sanity and support, their distortions go unchecked. You start believing them. You start doubting yourself. You become easier to manipulate, more compliant. You're not being loved, you're being subdued. And the cruelty of it is that when you're most vulnerable, they make sure you're most alone. During times of pain, confusion, or personal crisis, the healthy response would be to draw you closer to those who care about you. But the narcissist does the opposite. They isolate you further. Because your vulnerability is their opportunity. And in your silence, in your solitude, they speak the loudest. Even your own mind becomes compromised, because when no one else is there to reflect back your value, your clarity, your sense of reality, you begin to lose it. That's the ultimate goal, to make you question not just them, but yourself. And in that disorientation, they become your only reference point. The abuser becomes the compass, and that's when the soul begins to fracture. Make no mistake, this is not passive, it is not accidental, it is not a misunderstood attempt at love. It is strategic, psychological warfare. It is control disguised as care, domination masquerading as devotion. The narcissist doesn't isolate because they love too much. They isolate because it makes you easier to control. And when resistance dies, control reigns. That is their end game. And it begins with silence. There is a particular moment, subtle yet defining, when the narcissist evasion of accountability ceases to be mere denial and transforms into something more pathological, more dangerous: inversion. It's not just that they refuse to be blamed, it's that they must be seen as the one who suffers most, no matter the circumstances. They are never the aggressor, never the one who caused harm. In their narrative, they are always the wounded, always misunderstood, always persecuted. They become the eternal victim, a role so deeply internalized that it is not only performed but believed. And this inversion is not benign, it's corrosive, because at its core, it is a rejection of moral responsibility. Every relationship becomes a courtroom, and in that courtroom, they are always on trial, but always wrongly accused. They weaponize guilt, not as something to feel when they've done wrong, but as something to impose on others. If you confront them with truth, you are attacking. If you express hurt, you are too sensitive. If you ask for accountability, you are controlling. Your pain becomes the evidence of their suffering. This is how they escape the consequences of their actions, not through silence or avoidance, but through reversal. They rewrite the script. They steal your role and cast you in theirs. And they do it with such emotional conviction that outsiders often believe them. That's the danger. They're not lying in the conventional sense. They've buried themselves so deeply in this fantasy of victimhood that reality no longer holds sway over them. They're not pretending. They've become the character they've created. Why do they do this? Because to admit fault, even once, even in a small way, is to threaten the entire illusion of their false self. Accountability would force them to see the gap between who they pretend to be and who they actually are, and that confrontation is intolerable. So instead, they externalize every failure, every broken relationship, every betrayal, every loss. It's always someone else's fault. The world is cruel. You were disloyal. They were oppressed. Anything but look in the mirror. And it goes further. The eternal victim stance is also a form of control. Because if they can convince you that they're the one being harmed, you become the perpetrator. You become the one who has to apologize, to shrink, to question yourself. They exploit your empathy. They hook into your conscience. And once they've done that, they own you, not through strength, but through guilt. This inversion is the moral black hole at the center of the malignant narcissist psyche. Nothing escapes it. Not reason, not evidence, not compassion. It all gets twisted into fuel for their self-righteousness. And if you're not vigilant, you'll find yourself trapped in their fiction, defending yourself against accusations you didn't earn, while they walk away unscathed, unchanged, and ever more convinced that they are the righteous one. That is not mere denial. That is delusion weaponized. That is evil disguised as suffering. One of the most deceptive and dangerous dynamics in a relationship with a malignant narcissist is their calculated use of both validation and cruelty. Not as random traits, not as flaws, but as tools designed with a singular purpose: psychological enslavement. This is not affection, it's not love. It's a system, a method, a behavioral algorithm meticulously crafted to break your will, rewire your self-perception, and tether your identity to their approval. It begins with idealization. You are seen, praised, lifted, admired. And it feels real, because in that moment it is, but not in the way you think. What the narcissist is admiring isn't you in your fullness, your complexity. What they're admiring is a reflection of themselves in you. You are valuable only to the extent that you validate their significance. Your worth, in their eyes, is conditional, and that condition is allegiance, obedience, emotional submission. But here's where it becomes sinister. That warmth doesn't last. The praise is quickly followed by sharp, unpredictable cruelty. A cold remark, an insult disguised as a joke, withholding affection, dismissive silence. You're suddenly less than you were yesterday, and you don't know why. You begin searching for the cause, blaming yourself, wondering what you did wrong. That's the trap. Because now you're trying to earn back something that was never given freely. You're playing a game whose rules you don't understand and can't win. And just when the pain becomes unbearable, they offer you relief, a compliment, a moment of tenderness, an apology perhaps. But not because they mean it, because they see you slipping, because they can feel your spirit beginning to awaken to the manipulation. This oscillation between validation and cruelty is not chaos, it's precision. It's control through contrast. They are creating dependency, emotional addiction. You begin to crave their approval the way the starving crave food. You become hypersensitive to their moods, trying to anticipate their reactions, modifying yourself to avoid the cruelty and trigger the praise. And in doing so, you slowly disappear. Your identity becomes fragmented, your self-worth outsourced entirely to someone who weaponizes it at will. The tragedy here is that the more you lose yourself, the more power they gain. And they know it. They know exactly how much affection to give, how much pain to inflict, and when to switch between the two. It's like turning a dial up, down, sharp, soft, until you are perfectly tuned to them and nothing else. This is not love, this is psychological enslavement. It is domination wrapped in affection, captivity concealed behind compliments. And unless you recognize it for what it is, you will stay chained, begging for scraps of approval from the very hand that bruises you. Because when cruelty is calibrated and validation is conditional, you're not in a relationship. You're in a prison, one you've been manipulated into building yourself. There is something deeply disturbing, almost demonic, in the way the malignant narcissist views innocence. Not with admiration, not with reverence, but with hunger. Innocence to them is not a virtue. It is a vulnerability, a target, a blank canvas they can mark, stain, manipulate, and they must do so because to witness purity they do not possess is intolerable. It reminds them of what they lost, or worse, what they never had. Innocence, by its nature, is trusting. It doesn't begin with suspicion. It assumes goodwill, expects truth, and gives love without calculation. That's what makes it so profoundly beautiful and so incredibly fragile. The narcissist understands this intuitively, and where a healthy person might feel protective toward that vulnerability, the narcissist sees an opportunity, a soft spot, a door left open, and they enter not with gratitude but with conquest in mind. Because corrupting innocence offers a unique power. Anyone can manipulate the jaded or the broken, but to take someone untainted, to introduce shame where there was only trust, to sow doubt where there was only certainty, that's not just control, that's creation. They get to remake a soul in their own fractured image, and that's the point. The narcissist cannot tolerate the existence of something untouched by fear, untouched by self-hatred, so they inject it, and the methods are subtle. They don't attack innocence directly, that would provoke resistance. They start with flattery, with protection, with gentle corrections. They pose as mentors, lovers, guides, And then they introduce contradiction, mixed messages, small betrayals, confusion. And when the innocent one reacts, when they cry or question or push back, the narcissist feigns victimhood. I was only trying to help. You're too sensitive. Why are you making this so difficult? The innocent one, inexperienced in malice, folds inward, begins to doubt, begins to break. And here's the tragedy. Innocence cannot defend itself easily. It doesn't understand malice until it's too late. It has no weapon against the twisted logic of a narcissist who knows exactly how to manipulate empathy, how to weaponize kindness, how to use virtue against itself. That's the moral inversion. The very traits that make innocence good, openness, trust, compassion, become liabilities, and the narcissist exploits them without remorse. Because deep down they hate what they cannot be. They resent the light they cannot generate, and rather than strive toward it, they extinguish it in others. It's not about need, it's about annihilation. It's about proving that there is no such thing as purity, that everyone can be made like them if pushed hard enough, long enough, cruelly enough. That's their silent doctrine. No one is truly good, only untested. So the innocent become the proving ground. And unless someone intervenes, unless truth and strength arrive from the outside, that innocence will erode, and in its place, a new form of silence will grow. One born not of peace, but of shame. And the narcissist will smile, having succeeded once again in turning light into shadow. There is a terminal stage in the descent of the narcissist when all masks fuse into one and the inner lie calcifies into absolute conviction. It is not simply self-deception at this point. It is a delusion so profound, so complete, that it becomes indistinguishable from a form of spiritual possession. They no longer believe they're flawed. They no longer pretend to be better. They know with a certainty unshakable that they are above reproach, beyond error, exempt from the moral laws that bind the rest of us. This is the delusion of divinity, and it is the most terrifying transformation of all. You see, in the early stages of narcissism, there's still a faint war within, a flicker of guilt, an echo of conscience, a moment of self-awareness that perhaps they are the problem. But that whisper becomes inconvenient, painful, so it is silenced. Over time, again and again, the narcissist rejects accountability, truth, humility, and eventually what dies is not just the voice of reason, it's the capacity for remorse itself. That death leaves a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. Something always grows in its place. What grows is delusion. Grandiosity of the highest order, not merely I am good, not even I am right, but I am truth itself. I am the standard. I am untouchable. They begin to cast themselves as gods in their own narratives, divine arbiters of reality, moral authorities who can do no wrong because they've rewritten wrong altogether. And when this happens, something frightening emerges. Domination is no longer hidden behind charm or disguised by justification. It becomes sacred, justified, deserved. And those under their influence, they are not seen as equals. They are tools, instruments, servants of a higher purpose, the narcissist's purpose. Loyalty becomes worship. Obedience becomes tribute. Dissent becomes blasphemy. Try to challenge them, and you are cast not just as a threat, but as evil. Try to leave them, and they will claim abandonment, betrayal, sacrilege. This is not just psychological, it is metaphysical. Because to believe oneself divine is to place oneself above all correction, all empathy, all limitation. There is no longer any internal governor, no boundary they will not cross, no life they will not ruin if it dares to suggest they are fallible. You are not dealing with a person anymore. You are dealing with an ideology incarnate, a living, breathing embodiment of tyranny fueled by its own self-worship. And here's the darkest part. they often don't collapse, not in the way we expect, because they surround themselves with enablers, sycophants, and the shattered remains of those they've broken. And from that throne of lies, they continue to rule, dead inside, but more powerful than ever. Conscience buried, domination perfected. That is the final form. Not a flawed human grasping for identity, but a self-anointed deity claiming ownership over the souls of others. And once they believe they are divine, they no longer need to justify their cruelty. They simply are. So what do we do in the face of this darkness? This calculated erosion of identity? The inversion of truth? The targeting of innocence? And the self-anointed gods of delusion who walk among us cloaked in charisma and feigned pain? We do not appease it, we do not excuse it, and we do not call it anything less than what it is, because evil thrives in ambiguity. It grows stronger when cloaked in complexity, in euphemism, in polite denial. But when you name it, when you drag it into the light with precision and truth, you rob it of its camouflage. You see it not as wounded, but as willing, not as unaware, but as intentional. You protect the innocent not by making them tougher, but by making them clearer. You teach them to recognize manipulation not as confusion, but as strategy. You show them that love does not oscillate between cruelty and praise, that truth does not shift with mood, that God does not live inside those who demand worship at the cost of your soul. And when you meet such individuals, those who have killed conscience to enthrone themselves, you remember one thing above all: their greatest power is your silence. Break it. Their greatest illusion is inevitability. Challenge it. Their greatest weakness is your clarity. Wield it. Because once you see the pattern, you're no longer their prey. You're the resistance. And where resistance lives, tyranny dies.